Welcome back to Four-Way Stop, and welcome back to the 80s. It's our second part of this episode, and on this list we have a lot of great movies. So let's get right to it. Our first movie up is CreepShow 2.
All right, this one was released in May of 1987. It was directed by Michael Cornick, and the story is by Stephen King, and the screenplay was by George A. Romero, woohoo, and Lucille Fletcher.
It had a budget of $3.5 million, and it came out in 1987. What I love about CreepShow 2 is it was one of those movies that came out. I remember in the other episodes I was talking about Fright Night, which was a double feature that I'd watched as a kid. It had horror movies. And so CreepShow 2 was one of the first movies I'd ever seen. And I just loved it from the get-go. I think I loved it because it starts off as a cartoon. And so there's a guy on there. He's the CreepShow guy. He's kind of like the Crypt Keeper from like Tales of the Crypt. And he has like a book and they're telling stories. And so the first story is called Old Chief Woodenhead, and that story revolves around just a quick hit point on it. It's a spoiler. One of the store owners, he owns a store in an old town that's kind of dying. Anyways, the store owner gets murdered, and then the Native American Indian statue comes to life and kind of avenges his death. What I love about these stories is they get right to the point. Each story is probably maybe about 20 to 25 minutes long. So, it gets right to the action. They don't really waste too much time. So after that first story, then it goes into the back to the cutscene, which is a cartoon again. And the cartoon revolves around this kid who's buying CreepShow comics, and there's these bullies that are chasing him. And so it's pretty much like the cartoons of that. So once it goes into the next story, which is called The Raft. And that one's really simplistic. It's, I think, 4 college kids who goes, not skinny dipping, but they go swimming in the lake. And there's 4 of them, and they get stuck on the raft or the dock or whatever in the middle of the lake. And then there's this like gooey kind of blob thing.
This is a good one.
Yeah. And so like there's this gooey kind of blob thing, and it's like it looks like sewage kind of a little bit, but
sewage monster.
Yeah, the sewage monster. And so that one kind of it's this thing that's kind of like eating the college kids on the raft. So they're kind of stuck on the raft because it's revolving around the dock or the raft on the lake. So they're kind of stuck there for like a couple days, and they're trying to figure out how to escape, and all these things happen. So that one's The Raft. Then it goes back to the cutscene, and it's got the cartoon. And now the cartoon scene is kind of its own little story divided into 4 parts, which is really awesome as well. But then after that cutscene, it goes back into the hitchhiker, and that's the story about this lady. She's I think she's having an affair. I don't know if she's having an affair or not. Oh yeah, she is. And so then she hits a guy, a hitchhiker, and she justifies that she didn't hit him, but she knows she did. And so then it's kind of like psychological.
We've all been there before.
Yeah. It's the psychological aspect of like, did she hit him? And because she starts seeing him everywhere, and he's like all deformed and kind of bloodied and zombified. But it's kind of like the idea is this playing around playing in her head, or is this really happening? And so I'm not going to spoil it for you in the end, but it's a great payoff. And then it goes back to the wraparound with the cartoon, and you see what happens with that. Like I said, what I love about this movie, I think it's because it's really punchy. There's so many things going on. It's really funny. Not really funny, but it's fun. There's a lot of fun parts.
It's more over the top and campy.
Yeah, it's totally super campy, super fun. And like I said, it just gets right to it right from the beginning. I think like as a kid, when I think I was like maybe 9 or 10, I loved it because it started with a cartoon. I'm like, oh, a cartoon, this is awesome. And so then like the adult stuff happened with all the scary stuff. But I love this movie. I've seen it recently, and it still lives up for me personally. The hype still lives up, and it's a great movie to check out for Halloween. So CreepShow 2, check it out this Halloween.
Totally.
All right, our next movie on the list is Killer Klowns from Outer Space. It came out in 1988, and it had a budget of $1.8 million. It was directed by the Chiodo brothers.
All 3 of them.
All 3 of them. So it's the Killer Klowns from Outer Space is probably the perfect 80s horror movie staple. It's like it just has everything that 80s has.
Yeah.
It's campy, it's fun, it's scary. The clowns are super creepy and scary, but the storyline is so fun. It's so entertaining and campy that I just can't say enough about how fun this movie is. It's one of those movies that we watch throughout the year. If we're going to watch a horror movie, it doesn't necessarily have to be on Halloween, but we definitely check it out on Halloween because it's fun. Chris, what do you think about Killer Klowns? Like,
I just love it. It's one of the weirdest movies. I think when you talk to people about like about all the horror movies that are like classics, this is one of the ones that gets overlooked so often, and it's so funny.
And yet it has a big cult following, though.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
Totally.
This is totally like a cult following movie. It's like everyone knows Killer Clowns, so everyone knows like Freddy, Jason, Myers, but like everyone knows Killer Clowns. It's not like it's one
This
specific...
one's like it harkens back to like a Rocky Horror Picture Show for me.
Yeah.
Where it's got a huge cult following.
And the soundtrack to it's amazing. I love like the theme song, which was written by the Dickies, which is just like an awesome like punk band, and I think the theme song is just awesome on this. So many fun things about the movie.
The plot too is based around, basically, without getting too much into it, is that the clowns are actually aliens, right?
Yes.
And they're harvesting humans
for their brains.
Basically for their
yeah.
They wrap them in cotton candy and then stick
cocoons.
straws in their heads and suck out their brains.
Yeah. And one of the most distinct or memorable scenes for me, and I haven't seen this one in years, I have to warn you guys, so I could be off. But doesn't one of the clowns get in a fist fighting contest with a teenager in an alley somewhere?
No, it's not. It's a biker. It's a biker.
Oh,
guy.
It's a biker.
Yeah.
That's right. And doesn't he like, so the guy hits the clown a few times in the face, and it's the clown's turn?
Yeah.
And
well, it's like there's different types of clowns, and this is like the small clown, like he's the short clown that he's getting in a fight with the biker, and he said something like, "Go ahead, knock my block off," or something like that.
Yeah.
And he totally just clocks him, and his head goes flying off.
Yeah, he knocks the biker's head off.
And
yeah.
What I love is that there's so many different ways that the clowns kind of like they have different inventions. So like they keep
the balloon animals.
Yeah, the balloon animal
where they like are like hunting for people and they make balloon animal dogs.
Or,
and like...
or the
it's so stupid.
There's one scene. It's really. Well, the one scene where like they have they're doing the shadow puppets for people, and they're like, oh, and like it starts off so innocent, like they start clapping.
Oh, yeah, the shadow puppet eats somebody, right?
So then he makes the shadow puppet like a dinosaur or something, and they're like, oh, cool, and then he's like, and he just eats all the people. And
they're like, ah!
Yeah. So, anyways. The movies, it just revolves around these clowns going around the town and kind of capturing people or knocking people's heads off.
And their home base is this giant circus tent where this comet landed.
Yeah.
When they came in. It's a huge circus tent, right?
Yeah.
That's what it is. Yeah.
And that's their spaceship. And so, I mean, the whole movie, I mean, just the idea itself is super campy. So it's not like this movie's taking itself too seriously.
I thought it was based on a true story.
Yeah. Well, it's one of those, is it psychological? Like, is the clown really... real, or are we the clowns?
Hey man, is society the clown?
Yeah, that's what they were going for. But no, anyways, Killer Clowns is really fun, really campy. I don't even think there's a lot of swearing in it, or I mean, there might be a few words.
It's PG-13. It's not super gory or
yeah. There's a few words here or there. I don't think there. I know there's not any nudity. I think there's like a shower scene where a lady's taking a shower and they're like. There's like they throw popcorn, and I think the popcorn turns into like a killer clown or something, and so she might get out of the shower for a towel or something. But anyways, I don't think there's anything more than that. But yeah, definitely Killer Clowns from Outer Space is definitely a fun movie. I would definitely check it out this Halloween.
It's a must watch.
It's a must watch,
sure.
And I would even add it's a must watch if you have a group of people, like a group of people to watch it with. It's a lot more fun that way.
Mm-hmm.
It's a party movie.
Yeah, definitely fun to watch it on your own, but definitely a party movie. Okay, so Killer Clowns from Outer Space, check it out this Halloween. The next movie on our list is a classic. It's an icon. It's Child's Play. And if you know Child's Play, you know a little guy named Chucky. Chucky came out in 1988. It was directed by Tom Holland, and it had a budget of $9 million. It was like the late 80s. They kind of were giving a little more budget to like horror movies because people were like kind of clamoring for it more. So this is one of those movies that I remember seeing the preview as a kid. I'm like, a killer doll? Oh my gosh! Like this is creepy.
Oh yeah.
And so Child's Play is one of those movies that it stands the test of time. I think as we got older, it's become a little more comical. I mean, it's still creepy, but it's a lot more comical. I think when I saw it as a kid, it was like super creepy. I mean, everyone has that fear of like a doll coming to life and like attacking you or just coming to life in general.
Well, and this is still the days where you go into a Blockbuster, or even back then when I remember seeing the cover for Child's Play 1 and 2, I think I saw it at Fedco. I think I saw the cover for Child's Play at Fedco, and I was like, ooh, when I was a little kid. You know, those mom and pop video stores.
Yeah,
we had the VHS covers, where just seeing the cover freaked me out as a little kid.
Oh, dude, the cover was... So, just to for our younger audience, a VHS is a cassette that you put in a VCR. A VCR...
What's a VCR?
Is a
oh, no, beta.
A VCR is a thing we use before DVDs. A DVDs is what we use before Blu-ray. So anyways, that's what a VHS
All you need to know is please be kind, rewind.
That's right. So there used to be video stores back in the day, not like Redbox or Netflix. So you had to go to a store, and they'd have the covers of on the VHSs, which were kind of like the posters. And so all the scary movie had the posters or the covers of
We're dating ourselves so bad.
I know, this is sad, man. It's Child's Play, man. We're old. So it's perfect.
Go Chucky.
The movie's called Child's Play. So, all right, so back to Child's Play. So, anyways, the movie revolves around this killer doll, but it's not necessarily...
But it's about the guy that basically he possesses the doll.
You're right. And so
he's a killer, and his name is Charles Lee Ray or something.
Yeah, that's right. Charles Lee Ray. You're right.
And he...
Played by Brad Dourif of Lord of the Rings fame. He was on the X-Files. He's done
a lot of scary movies, actually.
Yeah,
so,
really good actor.
And so he's
basically a criminal.
He's running from the cops.
He happens into a mall like right around the time of Christmas, and
they're chasing him, right?
Yeah, they are.
The cops are chasing him.
Yeah,
and he gets killed, and he has some voodoo special power
right before he dies.
Right as he gets shot and he's dying, that he like incants this like weird
seance or whatever,
and he transplants his soul into a doll.
Yeah, which is the Chucky doll.
Yeah,
I think it's the good guy's doll.
The good guy's doll. Yeah, the good guys. And so now here I can't remember specifically. You just watched this. I know a lot about the movie, but I can't remember specifically. In the beginning, do you see that happening or no?
Yeah.
Oh, so that's the opening of the movie.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there's never like an inclination or an idea that it's supernatural. I mean, I guess it is supernatural, but like the doll's just talking on its own or whatever.
Yeah.
And
the thing that's awesome about this, really awesome about this movie is the kid that ultimately gets the Chucky doll.
Was his name Charlie? No.
I don't remember it.
It's been a few years.
But he really, really wants the Chucky doll, and it's like every mom's problem. Like, I want to get my kid his Christmas dream present, or I think it was his first birthday.
It was for his birthday. And it's a single mom, so she's probably struggling with money and everything.
And so she's working at this like jewelry store or something like that in the mall, and her friend tells her, "Hey, I've got some guy." So she goes out into the alley and buys the doll from a bum who happens to have been at the place where this murderer was killed with the Chucky doll. And she buys that doll.
He's like,
no plot loopholes there.
Would you like the good guy doll or the Turbo Man doll? Oh, I would want the Turbo Man doll right there.
Look at the Turbo Man.
So she buys
jingle all the Chucky.
So being a really, really good mom, she buys her son this good guy doll. I think in the movie she pretty much brings the doll home, gives it to her son for her birthday, and says, "Okay, I love you, honey. I got to go back to work because her work made her work late."
Hope it doesn't come to life.
And left the son with a babysitter.
So and so like Andy, it was Andy. That's the good. So what's Chucky? Okay, anyway, so that's Chucky's voice apparently.
Story.
Yeah, like Andy. So anyways, so the movie goes along, and it kind of goes into this whole thing where it's like, Andy's talking about how the doll's talking to him and everything. And, like most parents are like, oh, he's just overactive imagination. He's got an imaginary friend, yada, yada, yada.
He's saying, like, hey, Chucky doesn't want to watch that TV show.
Or, like, or something happened. I don't know if, like, a bowl fell on the ground or something. Oh. And then his mom's like, who did this? He's like, Chucky did it. And so it's just kind of like that whole thing.
It builds up.
So then there's a crucial point, and here's a spoiler, because it's not a spoiler, but it's like a crucial point in the movie. The mom grabs the Chucky doll, and she's kind of starting to believe at this point, and so she turns the doll over, and so she turns the doll over, and kind of came to the realization. Oh, she grabs the box, and in the box there's batteries. The batteries fell out. And she's like, wait a second. Did I ever put those in?
Yeah.
I got to just drop this doll off.
I'm a bad mom.
So then she grabs the doll because the doll's been talking this whole time, by the way. So she turns the doll over, opens the back like as slow as possible, opens the back to the batteries.
There are no batteries.
There's no batteries. And then Chucky turns his head around and says, "Want to play?" or something, and then rolls down to the ground.
And he rolls under the couch.
Yeah, he rolls on the couch. She finally grabs him because he's still not like showing him that he's alive. She grabs him. She turns the fireplace on. And
she's gonna burn him.
And she's gonna burn him. And I wish we could say this on the podcast, but we're keeping it clean, so we're not gonna say it. But she's like, talk to me. And then it's just like you think it's gonna be like this.
He reveals himself.
Yeah,
that's all we should say. He reveals his true nature.
He reveals himself, but you think it's gonna be in like this scary, freaky way. But it's in like the most hilarious.
It's comedic genius.
It's so awesome. It's like creepy.
Brad Dourif is the man.
But funny at the same way, and I love it.
Yeah, stupid.
Yeah, he's stupid.
And the part that's really funny is like almost immediately after following that scene, she goes to the cop who is investigating the murder of the babysitter.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, and she like tells him the whole thing, like the doll's alive, the doll's a killer.
Oh, and this features the detective is Chris Sarandon.
Yeah.
He's also famous of Fright Night. Yeah, Fright Night.
And
Princess Bride, a whole bunch of movies, yeah.
And it has one of the funniest scenes, and I just watched it last night, so it's so much more funny. But there's a whole scene in the car where Chucky's stabbing him through the seat, and the guy has his foot on the gas the whole time. And there's no inkling of like I'm gonna slam on the brakes and like take care of it. And Chucky just keeps stabbing him like through the bottom of the seat, like almost hitting like important stuff.
Yeah.
And it's just pretty funny.
So what I love about Chucky,
it's just a good time.
It's a good time, getting
time.
stabbed by a killer doll. What I love about Chucky or Child's Play is that Chucky himself, like. As an adult, like I remember still seeing it as a kid, I thought it was creepy. As an adult, you see the personality of Chucky just come out and be so over the top. He swears, he's so angry, and he just wants to put his body, he wants to get out of the body of the doll and put it in Andy's body. So he's not necessarily trying to kill Andy. He wants to use the voodoo stuff to transform his body into the child's body so he has a new body.
Right.
Or a new human body. So anyways, Child's Play is definitely a great movie to check out. We could talk about it all night.
Yeah,
but,
we've said enough.
Yeah, but definitely check out Child's Play.
Watch it.
It's a staple. It's fun. It's campy. Not like over the top. Like it takes itself. Like it knows it's not taking itself serious. It's a serious movie, but it's still fun and entertaining. So definitely check out Halloween this year. Child's Play. Oh, sorry. Definitely check out Child's Play this Halloween.
Or Halloween, then Child's
Check out Halloween.
Check out both. The next movie on our list is The Blob. The Blob came out in 1988, and it was directed by Chuck Russell.
Yeah.
The movie is exactly what it is. It's The Blob. No serial killer, no supernatural, no nothing. It's just The Blob. It came from outer space. It's a living organism, and it's here to wreak havoc on a little town. What I love about The Blob is that it's campy. I'm not 100% sure if the movie's taking itself seriously or if it isn't. It's kind of one of those movies.
I think they're having fun as a remake.
Yeah.
It's having fun.
So the remake of it's the remake of the original Blob from like I think the 1950s. And that one's, I mean, I don't know if you've ever seen that one, but it's just a lot slower. It's, the cutscenes.
Totally,
It's like,
totally.
oh, the Blob, and everyone's taking off.
Yeah.
This one's just kind of like
This one gets to it.
It gets to it. It's fast paced. It's action packed. There's a lot. What I love about this movie and other horror movies in general is that there's different stories going on at the same time. So there's the main story with like the main protagonist. He's like he's got a motorcycle and he's like
Leather jacket.
Yeah, leather jacket. He's trying to prove like, hey, there's this thing out there that's kind of killing people. I think it's a blob. I don't know. So you got like his story.
It's blobbish.
Yeah.
Oh no.
So you have his story. Then you got like the babysitter story, who she has these two like they're probably like 11 or 12 or something, and she's like taking care. So like has like 2 or 3 different side stories, and then like people around town getting like annihilated by the blob. So that's one of the things I really love about this movie. It doesn't just center around one thing and one thing only. It goes all over the place. It's got like the hazmat, like I don't know if they're like FBI or whatever they are. And so that like their story of like, oh, we got to get this alien, and
it's like a really violent version of ET.
Yeah, that's perfectly what it is. And so, but don't touch the Blob because he will suck you down the sink. And
it's got great practical special effects, by the way, too.
Yeah,
really good ones.
What I love is there's a lot of like fun ways that the Blob kind of eats people. There's like we were talking about, one guy gets just sucked through a sink, which is just unheard of. Like just like a kitchen sink. He's like at a restaurant, and so. And then I guess if you think about it, like the earlier movie we reviewed was CreepShow 2, kind of like the raft, and then we're talking about like there was this creature in the water that like was kind of getting the kids or whatever. That's what the Blob is. It's kind of like, I guess it would be like really sticky, gooey material that would kind of just grab.
I'm gonna go back to Sewage Monster.
Sewage Monster. So it's called the Sewage Monster, also known as the Blob. But anyways. So the movie, it's really fun. It's really campy. I'm not going to really go in depth too much on the whole movie because the whole movie is kind of itself. It's the Blob. The Blob is the movie. It just goes and starts killing people, and you don't know why, but you just got to stop it. It's just, there's no explanation. Like I said, it's a living organism. It just goes and kills things, and you don't know why. And the more it kills things, the bigger it gets. So it starts kind of small, and the more people throughout the movie,
absorbs people and their energy or their protein or whatever.
And so it gets bigger. It grows bigger. And so
it's like Alien from the first Alien.
Yeah. Yep. And so as it gets bigger,
Xenomorph, excuse me.
As it gets bigger and bigger and bigger, it's kind of like this huge thing that's getting out of control. And so they even do this thing like, oh, it could be the size of the United States or whatever if we don't stop it. So, anyways, check out The Blob. It's a great movie.
It's really fun.
Really fun. Yeah. One of those party movies we were talking about. Spoiler that I love. So this is a spoiler. At the very, very end of the movie, there's like a priest or whatever. And he's like talking about the end of the world. He's like, oh, what's happening? The end of the world. And then the Blob like gets him. And so then like you think he dies, but then at the very end of the movie, he's not dead. And I think he's like he's at the end of the movie is like him in like a tent and like just like the middle of the field doing like some church revival thing, and he's talking about the end of the world. And then one of the people in the congregation goes, he's like, when is it going to be the end of the world, Father? And then the guy, the priest looks into a jar and he's like, the Lord will tell me when. And it's and he has one of the Blob in there,
the Blob,
which is such an awesome ending. I love it. And so, anyways, check out the Blob this year. It's really good. It's really fun. And definitely a recommendation for Halloween. So check it out. The next movie on our list is, it's just one of those special movies. It's a movie called Aliens. Let's be clear here. Aliens, plural.
Oh, yeah.
And so it was directed by James Cameron. It came out in 1986, and it had a budget of $18.5 million. So it had a higher budget for... And, okay, here's the thing. Aliens will always be shown around Halloween. I'm not 100% sure I would classify it as a horror movie.
Oh, yeah, it is.
It's more of a...
it's more like of a sci-fi action thriller.
It could be fallen into any category. So sci-fi, action, horror. It's a movie that would be played year-round throughout, on TV.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily one that would come out during Halloween. Chris, don't. This is a kid's show, okay? Anyways, but Aliens is definitely one that comes out during Halloween. So it's a universally loved and universally played movie that falls into a lot of different categories. So Aliens is definitely a favorite of all of ours. And
I mean, it's hard because I'm divided. I love the original Alien movie, and it's hard to trump that movie, but Aliens just takes it to a whole new level.
Well, Aliens, here's the thing. Aliens is a lot more punchy. Like, Alien is in the first part, or part one, whatever. It's like we talked about. It's such a slow, steady pace where Aliens kind of just gets right to it.
It just hops right.
It's kind of like Terminator and Terminator 2. I mean, Terminator actually had a lot of action, but Terminator 2 was way more puncher, which is also another James Cameron film. So I think Aliens, it has like you have more characters, bigger build up. Like even they have
Bill Paxton.
Oh
rest
my
in
gosh.
peace.
And so I mean,
game over, man.
Game over, man. It's over. He says another word, but that's it. But I mean, go ahead. It's just the thing. Like I love once you see the big guns, you're like, oh, this is gonna be different.
Yeah, and it's just so fun. Like I mean, the whole movie, like the Marines being on the site. I mean, the first movie was so secluded. I mean, you had the the alien attacking them, and they're on the ship, and this being on the planet, seeing like the aliens spread out, and the Marines coming in and save them, and seeing, I mean, one of my favorite characters of all of the Alien movies is Newt. She's just so fun.
The girl, yeah.
Yeah, the little girl that's like been hiding on the planet with the aliens all around her.
How long was it? Like 2 weeks or something? Or
I'm not sure, but they mostly come out at night.
They mostly come out at night, mostly.
Well, I mean, this movie, when the cocoon scene, right? When they're all in that room and then the cocoons start opening, you're like, what? Like, 'cause the doors, they shut automatically, right? Or they lock them in there, and then the cocoons start opening, and you're like, oh crap.
Well, one note I have to give too is if you get a chance to see the director's cut, which has at least I think 15 minutes of new footage. That one is so good because there's the scene. One of the most epic scenes is where they position these automatic turret guns outside the bay doors where they're all locked in about a little over halfway through the movie to try to protect themselves from the aliens. And they're just watching the round count go down, and it's so well directed and so well shot because you don't see the actual aliens that much except for when you see them blowing apart when they're getting hit by the rounds from the turret guns. And they're in this room just going, and they see this number of all the rounds left, the bullets left in the guns, going down and down and down. They go, there's so many of them, man. Yeah. Like, they just keep coming. And it's such a good scene, but it's already a long movie. But trust me, guys, it's worth it to watch the full director's cut of it because there's a few extra good scenes like that one. It's like cinema, iconic. It's like iconic cinema.
And is Aliens the one where they have the scene where they're in the room and they're tracking the aliens and they're looking at the screen and they see the aliens crawling closer towards them, and they're in the room and they keep seeing the tracking GPS.
They should be right on top of us.
They're like right on top of it, and that's the Bill Paxton. Like, it's game over, man, game over.
Well, no,
that's earlier in the movie.
That's earlier when the ship
blows up and crash lands.
And so. Well, he has so many.
That's where the aliens are crawling through the vents up above them and everything else. That's where the crap hits the fan.
And then they got to go in the vents, and Well, the other thing we forgot to mention last time when we were reviewing Alien is what makes the aliens so much. I mean, they're creepy already in general because they're really creepy and they're really fast. And the thing is,
in the first movie, there's just one.
Yeah.
In this movie, it's plural.
Yeah.
There's a ton of them. There's hundreds of them.
Which and it just amplifies the terror, the fear of it. And what makes it even more scary is that you can't necessarily just kill them either, because when you kill them, what happens? They spew out acid.
The acid.
So it's like you got to be aware of that. You can't like just kill one close range, because I think that happens, right? Where they kill one close range and it just like splurts acid right in their face, and it's just so.
That's the first time when the aliens attack, and there's the great scene where they did a special effect, like practical effect, where Michael Biehn puts the shock, like the one guy shoots the alien and it splatters acid on his face.
Oh my goodness! That's so
it's like melting in his flesh on his face. And Michael Biehn goes into the alien where he's blocking the door of that Land Rover kind of vehicle they have. And he goes, "Eat this!" and he blows the back of its head off with a shotgun. Oh, dude, there's so many classic movie lines that are iconic. The directing, it has that classic James Cameron kind of bluish hue lighting that's super famous nowadays. He did that with Terminator 2, the Aliens, True Lies, and you look at any of his movies like that, they all have that same kind of bluish hue lighting. So the lighting, the special effects, the cinematography, the acting, everything is top notch to where it's one of those movies where it's not just fun for Halloween. For me, it's one of not just my favorite horror movies of all time, because it's not just horror, it's sci-fi, it's a thriller, it's an action movie. It's one of my top favorite movies of all time.
Yeah,
period.
Absolutely.
And I have to say, like, it's funny because this is one that stuck with me forever. This is one that I stayed home sick from school one day, and my dad he called me at home and told me, "Don't tell your mom, but there's a movie in the VCR. Just watch it." And
what's a VCR?
we explained that on the last episode.
I'm just saying, I watched this movie and it changed my opinion of horror movies and sci-fi and everything forever. I mean, it's just awesome.
Here's the thing, and I know in the last episode I said I haven't seen Alien, the first one, and I'm not gonna lie because I'm ADD and I'm like, oh, that one's a lot slower.
Totally, dude.
And but like they're like, before we were gonna review this, they're like, have you seen Aliens? I'm like, of course, it's fun, it's action packed, it gets right to it. So I will see Alien. I promise. I'll see Alien Part 1, but Aliens plural Part 2 is amazing. It's a lot of fun. It gets right to it.
It has a great twist at the ending when you
great.
think with the Queen Alien. I don't want to give too much away.
Yeah.
But Lance Henriksen, Sigourney, all the actors, Michael Bean,
and Paul Reiser, such a scumbag. It's like,
dude, it's
but
such
it's so
a
awesome.
well done movie.
Yeah,
it's one of those movies where when I watch it, even the director's cut, the standard theatrical version, I couldn't think of too many things they could have changed to make it better.
Yeah,
it's one of those few movies you watch and you go, yeah, that's perfect.
Yeah, well, especially a lot of movies today, like Chris and I will see movies like every other week or something. We're like, you know what I would have changed in that movie? I would have changed this, or it would have been cool if they did this. Like Aliens is a it's a classic. You're like, that was fun. You just watch it, you enjoy it, and there's nothing else you say.
Oh, the score, the directing, the cinematography, the acting. I mean, it's just the writing. Everything is perfect in this. In fact, you guys saw a while ago, like 2 Halloweens ago, I ordered a shirt I found online. That's such a small little thing in the movie that I didn't realize they even made shirts of it until the last time I saw it. It's stamped on the side of the landing craft that they have when they land on LV-406, whatever the planet is, and to investigate this distress call about aliens, taking over this colony of humans that are there, possibly wipe them all out, which, spoiler, they do. But there's a stamp on the side of the ship that has this eagle with these, like, rifles shooting shells into the air, and it says, we endanger species. And the top of it says Bug Stomper.
Nice.
So clearly they've encountered these aliens before. They refer to them as bugs, almost like Starship Troopers a little bit.
Yeah.
But dude, it's such a classic logo. If you look it up, Bug Stomper, we endanger species is just so funny because it's this hardcore Marine hoorah, kind of thing, like slogan. And but it's again though, it harkens back to the whole it's funny because they land all hardcore ready. These Marines, Marines do, and something bad, it goes wrong. Basically, it's so funny though, and again, Bill Paxton, one of I think his best performances of all time.
Oh yeah,
he will be missed because this is one of his most iconic roles. And some of the most iconic lines in all the movies.
One of the most
that's
quoted.
Just great, man.
Yeah.
This
One of the most
great.
quoted lines too. That everyone, if you just say the movie Aliens and you say Bill Paxton, everyone's just gonna say that line.
Game over. Yeah,
Game over,
totally.
man. So, anyway, so this Halloween, check out Aliens. It's definitely a Halloween staple, but actually it's a movie you could check out throughout the year. So if you don't have time to check it out for Halloween, which we do recommend, check it out sometime sooner than later. So Aliens. The next movie on our list is technically not a horror movie, but it's definitely a Halloween movie. It's a movie that everyone's seen. It's a movie that...
Who you gonna call?
Ghostbusters. It's a movie directed by Ivan Reitman, and it was written by Dan Aykroyd and Harold Ramis. It came out in 1984, and it had a budget of $30 million. So, like I said, it's technically not a horror movie. It's more of a comedy movie that has to do with ghosts, Ghostbusters. And,
it had a box office of almost $300 million.
Oh, yeah. So, it was a mainstream movie. So, Ghostbusters, the plot of Ghostbusters has to do with these 4 women that ruin a classic movie. And, wait, no, that's not Ghostbusters.
Whoa!
Just kidding.
Uh-oh.
I can just tell you how I feel about that. Let's just say that there's some movies...
Safe spaces.
There's some movies that should not be remade. I know everything's being remade, but here's the thing. If you're going to touch a classic like Ghostbusters, you definitely did not need to throw, kind of like, hey, let's get 4 women. They do it all the time with remakes. Hey, they had a guy last time, let's do women this time. Or, this guy was short this time, let's get a tall guy. Whatever.
It's not just about that for me. It's one of those things where, I can't talk too much. I never saw the remake.
Yeah. Well, I did, and here's the thing. I saw it, and I tried to give it the benefit of the doubt. I wasn't trying to be like...
It looked bad.
And here's the thing. I wasn't trying to be like, women aren't funny, women aren't this. I don't care about that.
They're not, but go on.
But
I'm just kidding.
The point is... They tried way too hard. It was because there was so much backlash already. They tried way too hard to be like, women are funny and we are empowering and we are that. And that's great because women are empowering. They are funny. But if you push that down someone's throat and tell them this is what it is, then people are going to be like, no, it's not. And the thing is, they were trying too hard. It's kind of like that girl you like and... Everyone knows you like her, and you're trying to impress her, and you're trying too hard that she's gonna pick up on it and be like, "Kind of leave me alone." That's what that movie was. I went into it trying to be like, "I'm trying to like it. I'm trying to like it," but it was just too much.
Gotcha.
So it was not Ghostbusters. I mean, honestly, if they just called it something else and it was kind of like they were paying tribute to Ghostbusters, but they didn't call it Ghostbusters, it'd probably be like, okay, they're trying to make a Ghostbusters type of movie, and I think most people would have been open to that. Anyways, we'll save that for another day. But let's talk about Ghostbusters, the original, the classic. I mean, the hit.
Bill Murray, Dan Aykroyd, Harold Ramis.
And
Danny
Glover. No, just kidding.
Whoa.
I'm joking. It was Ernie Hudson.
Ernie Hudson, Rick Moranis. Oh, so many...
Riggs, I got a ghost over here.
My EK meter's off the charts, Riggs.
Don't cross the beams, Riggs. All right, sorry. So, okay, it was Ernie Hudson. And here's the thing, and I'm joking, but when you think of Ghostbusters, you think of Dan Aykroyd, Harold Ramis, and Bill Murray. But Ernie Hudson, like, it's so unfair. He always gets left off. Like, it's like those three. But it's like Ernie Hudson was, crucial.
Yeah, he loves this town.
And so, yeah. And the thing was, I think it's because he didn't come into the movie until, like, I think it was maybe, like, more than halfway into it. He didn't, come into the Ghostbusters scene. So, but he is a Ghostbuster. So, anyways. It's classic. We don't really have to go too much in depth about Ghostbusters.
No, everybody's seen this by now, dude. It's a staple. It's a classic. Not just in horror, not just in comedy, but I think it's one of the most well-regarded movies of all time. Because it really was a milestone in cinema, I think for most people in the 80s, because Bill Murray was at the top of his game, Dan Aykroyd, Harold Ramis, all those guys were really famous. So when this came out, even Rick Moranis, like when this came out, there was a lot of anticipation for it, and it's a movie I remember seeing as a kid, and I never stopped loving it, even now into an adult.
Yeah.
Like, it's one of those where it still holds up. The special effects are really well done. It's super... The humor is really good. The writing is really good. It's super funny.
It's on point.
Dan Aykroyd's the total nerd, whatever.
Sigourney
Weaver, I'm sorry,
is
you mentioned
so creepy in that movie.
Yeah.
Are you the gatekeeper?
But yeah, so there's the actors, the actresses, the screenplay, everything to me is on point. It's one of those lightning in a bottle movies where it's like, you can't really remake it, which I think is what happened with the remake, where you can't have lightning strike twice. It's just one of those where it's like, it was such a special event, such a special movie, that it just,
It's like, you can't, perfect, what you said. It's the movie, you couldn't remake it, and if you had to remake it, you'd have...
you can. It's not going to have the same effect.
But if you wanted it to be successful, you'd have to get, like, the best writers. You'd have to get their blessing and have them actually write it with you. Not just their blessing, to actually make it work. Because if not, then you're just going to have a watered-down, hack version of it. And that's what it was.
And people would want to see the original cast, which, of course, unfortunately, Harold Ramis is no longer with us.
Yeah. And
rest in peace, because he's such a great writer, director, directed a ton of comedies in the 80s, including Caddyshack and a few other huge staples. So, it's just one of those where it's like I said, it's lightning in a bottle. I won't repeat myself, but it's just a once-in-a-lifetime kind of thing. And
all the characters are so lovable. Not just, like, the Ghostbuster characters, but the actors themselves, like, everybody loves Bill Murray. I don't think I've ever met anyone that says, I don't like Bill Murray. Everyone loves Bill. Dan Aykroyd, for the most part, Harold Ramis at the time, absolutely. And so it's like, you get these icons.
Rick Moranis,
Sigourney Weaver. And even Rick Moranis, like, he retired from acting, and so he said, I'm not going to do another Ghostbusters. But just like that character, it was so good. And it's like, that perfect piece of the puzzle that you can't...
Everything lined up exactly where it needed to be.
The stars aligned, and it made a great movie. The thing I love about Ghostbusters is that it's a comedy, but it has, like, scary... I guess, I won't say horror.
Not scary, but spooky and funny. And...
Well, there's some parts where it's like... I remember, like, Ernie Hudson and Dan Aykroyd are talking in the car, and then Ernie Hudson's talking about, like, the end of the world.
Drive over the bridge. They're talking about Revelations.
Yeah, and it's kind of like a creepy scene, like in a funny movie.
The dead will rise from the grave.
And then I just see, like, Dan Aykroyd's face. I'm like, that's exactly how I'm feeling right now, And so
even the scene with Bill Murray, like, going into Sigourney Weaver's apartment, and, like...
And she's levitating off the bed.
Yeah, she's, like, levitating, and he opens the fridge, and you see, like, the zoo thing happen. It's just like... my God!
I think why everybody loves Bill Murray is because I think a lot of people's response to fear is laughter and comedy. So it's like whenever
skepticism.
So whenever I see, like, a really, really scary movie, like legit scary, like a new one like The Conjuring or The Exorcist or. Like I have to put something funny on to kind of make me feel better, and I think like in the scenes with Bill Murray, when you see something kind of creepy, he always throws a one-liner in there to kind of like
deadpan, skeptic, like this isn't happening, this isn't reality,
which makes it so much like okay, that's what I would do, that's how I would go about it,
I think Bill Murray's the audience in the movie.
Yes, exactly. He's like the self-aware audience, like okay, well, like he even says a line when she's levitating, and I can't remember the line, but it's like a funny line where she's levitating. He's like okay, like he says something, but anyways. But Ghostbusters is...
She slept above the covers.
Yeah.
4 feet above the covers.
It's like, this is one of those movies we've been talking throughout the episodes, is that we don't know when we're going to let our sons watch scary movies, because we're like, well, I don't know. But Ghostbusters is one of those, like, movies you could kind of start them off with, Like, it's pretty easy, it's pretty light. There's a little swearing, but not anything over the top or too bad. But yeah, I definitely recommend Ghostbusters right now for Halloween. Absolutely, they're gonna show it on AMC or any of the other channels throughout Halloween. But it's a comedy, not a horror movie. Comedy, spooky, scary movie. But definitely check out Ghostbusters this year for Halloween. The next movie on our list is Lost Boys. It was directed by Joel Schumacher, and it came out in 1987. It had a budget of $8.5 million. And Lost Boys is one of those movies it's kind of one of those cool horror movies. It has to do with like, the vampires.
It's cool because everyone's cool.
Yeah, it's
Kiefer
cool.
Sutherland is in it.
Well, it's not like your classic
and Corey Feldman.
Yeah. It's not like your classic and Corey Haim.
And Jason Patrick.
That's true. Anyways, enough of that. So it's not like your classic vampires. Like I want to suck your blood. It's like the.
Which is not even a classic vampire.
Well, but like they're cool teenage vampires, and the vampire leader is Kiefer Sutherland, and I think it takes place in like the Santa Cruz, like up north up there, and it revolves around this gang of vampires, and they kind of there's like I don't know if he's a new kid in town or
yeah, they're new kids in town.
Yeah, they just moved.
And so, like, he's kind of talking...
It's like Karate Kid with vampires.
Actually, if you really think about it, that's kind of more or less...
Pretty much it.
That's why I said it.
So
summed it up, watch Karate Kid, we're done.
Done. So, yeah. It said Mr. Miyagi's not in it, so... but the movie is great because it has to do with, like, these vampire teenage group gang or whatever, and there's a new kid, and the new kid kind of likes this girl, or he's kind of, like, checking her out, and then her boyfriend, I guess, is, like, the head vampire guy.
And Kiefer.
Yeah, and so anyway,
I'm the head vampire.
Thou shalt not steal.
Yes. So thank you, Chris, for that drop in. That's the theme song in the beginning of the movie. But the movie it's fun, it's quirky. You got Corey Haim and Corey Feldman working together. They're kind of like they're probably like 14 or something.
Super nerdy.
And they believe in vampires, and they're like trying to figure out how to like stop vampires. And they're like in a comic book store, or they're like the comic book kids or whatever.
The thing that's kind of fun about this movie is it totally. I think this is one of those movies that could totally be one that you showed your kids. I mean,
well, I don't know.
Well, I mean,
it's rated R.
Depending on your kid's level. I mean, it's just like fun.
I would say age level, not just level of. But I mean, no, I understand what you're saying.
Go on though. Go on.
I mean, just the kids in the movie.
I see
his brother becomes a vampire, and he's investigating all the things that stop vampires.
So Corey Feldman's brother, the younger one, yeah.
Yeah, so he's like, he at one point in the movie like hangs garlic all over the house, and he like gets holy water and puts it in his. Is it a squirt gun he puts it in?
Yeah.
And he's like squirting his brother with it. And even the scene where his brother's like levitating outside his window. Mm-hmm. And it's just fun. Like it's
like a Goonies meets vampires.
Yeah,
like.
Exactly.
Oh, and notable mention, one of the stars of the film, Alex Winter, who went on to go to Bill and Ted.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yep. He was Bill.
Party on, Bill.
He did The Lost Boys. He did Bill and Ted. Then
that was it. Let's call it a career.
Well, that's perfect.
What's going into accounting?
Hey, can I be in John Wick 3? So
I'm Bill S. Preston, accountant.
Anyway,
Esquire.
Wild Things. All right. Anyway, so Lost Boys. We haven't really told you much about this movie yet, but the movie, like I said, there's not much to say. It's your standard 80s horror movie that has to do with vampires. Guy turns into a vampire, and his brother's trying to figure out how to not be a vampire. And he says you got to kill the head vampire.
Always good goals.
Well, and here's the thing, and that's where the whole you got to kill the head vampire. And you think that Kiefer, I don't want to ruin it because
the Kiefer is the head
you think
vampire.
Kiefer is the head vampire because the whole movie shows him as the main antagonist. He's kind of like a punk, a bully, but it turns out that he's not the head vampire. And there is a twist later in the movie where you find out who the head vampire is.
Right.
And so let's just say he's not a lot closer to home, but that should give you a little heads up right there. But anyways, Lost Boys, it's fun. Like I said, Corey Feldman and Corey Haim are great together. They've always been great together, especially in the 80s and when they were younger. They were a lot of fun. They have a lot of great lines.
Alex Winter.
Yeah. And so that's the fun aspect, kind of like a little not side story, but you kind of see their story too, where this guy's kind of, the older brother's kind of more serious. He's kind of like, trying to fight back and everything.
He's a little goth, bro.
Yeah. It's the goth,
Death
the whole
by stereo.
So anyway, as you see, we're having a lot of fun remembering about this movie. So definitely, Lost Boys, check it out.
You gotta watch it.
Halloween. We didn't give you too much information. I think we're doing it on purpose because you just got to check it out and see it for yourself. So watch Lost Boys this Halloween. The next movie on our list is one of my personal favorites. It's The Monster Squad.
The Monster Squad.
We're the Monster Squad.
It was directed by Fred Decker, and it came out in 1987. It had a budget of $12 million, which is a little higher. Nice. But the box office only drew $3.8 million. I think with this movie they were trying to go for like the Goonies draw because the movie revolves around I think it's 4 or 5 kids, and they have this club that's called the Monster Squad. And they kind of like to talk about scary movies. And some of the movies they talk about or like kind of revolve around is some of the movies that you love the most, the Universal.
Oh, yeah. The old Universal monster movies from the 30s and 40s.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Classic monsters.
And so it's not just that they talk about the movies, but they kind of investigate, not supernatural stuff, but I guess you could say supernatural or things that happen with monsters. So anyways.
And it's an excuse for all the monsters to come together in one movie.
Yes. So it was one of those things where they wanted to bring all the Universal monsters together in one movie. I don't know if there was like copyright issues or anything, but they even mentioned in the movie about like Frankenstein. Like Frankenstein's not Frankenstein. He's Frankenstein's monster,
Yeah, and the creature from the Black Lagoon is not that. He's called the Gill Man.
The Gill Man, yeah. And so then I think Dracula was general enough where it could just be called Dracula. But the movie is awesome because you have all these characters. You got the Frankenstein. We'll just say Frankenstein. Whatever. Yeah. You got Frankenstein, the creature from the Black Lagoon, the werewolf, Dracula, and the Mummy. And it's cool because it shows how each one arrives to the town or whatever, and each one's a different story. Like the Wolfman, you see that he's a real guy that's turning into like a werewolf, and you see that he's kind of like he doesn't want to be this creature, but for some reason he's a werewolf, and you
totally see the connection with the like main protagonist, the kid. His father is like investigating
because his father's a policeman.
Yeah, and he's like investigating the attacks this Wolfman is doing.
Yeah, exactly. So there's a lot of connections intertwining. The Dracula is the main antagonist, and he's kind of getting all the creatures together to kind of like take over the town and whatever, cause havoc. And so then this monster squad, these kids, it's totally Goonies because they even have like the chubby kid who's supposed to be like the chunk character. And
don't they always meet like in a tree house
or
like a tree fort kind of a thing?
And so and then they get this kind of like the cool kid. He's got like the leather
and he's
jacket.
Spying on the guy's sister.
Yeah, he's on the guy's sister. He's like, oh, I think I'm gonna like this club. And so.
Oh, by the way, great tagline for the original poster. It says, "You know who to call when you have ghosts," harkening back to Ghostbusters. But who do you call when you have monsters? So that's
the Monster Squad.
Cool.
Yeah.
The Monster Squad. Yeah.
Who are you gonna call?
Never been done, bro.
Yeah. So, I love this movie because it's fun. There's a lot. I think I saw this movie as a kid, probably around the same age the kids are in the movie. They're probably anywhere between like 9 to like 14. And you're very relatable, especially if you like scary movies. You're kind of like, oh, that'd be really cool. I could, relate to that. one of the little girls in the movies, she's like the sister of one of the kids from the club. She finds Frankenstein and she befriends him. And so Frankenstein's kind of like, he was brought in by Dracula to be like the enforcer, like the brute. But he's actually like a nice, lovable character that the kids kind of win over. And so he's kind of like on the Monster Squad side now. So the whole movie, it's really cool because there's so many...
To be fair, he's brain dead.
Well, yeah.
And the funny thing is, even like the girl and like all of them, they have one of the main guys that helps them turn the tables is a scary German guy.
Oh, the German
Right.
guy. Well, you gotta have the German guy, right? Yeah.
And it's funny because the girl's the one that kind of like leads them to him too.
Yeah. And so the movie, I mean, we're not going to give too much away because it's definitely a movie to check out. It's really fun. Definitely, like, check out because of that. It's really fun. There's so many different storylines. It doesn't just focus on, like, one storyline. So it focuses on, like, Dracula and then how the mummy gets here and then the creature from the Black Lagoon or whatever lagoon, the creature from the lagoon, the Gillman.
Gillman.
Yeah, and so then I think the kid's name is Horace or whatever, and he, like, shoots the Gillman with the shotgun.
Yeah.
And that's one of my favorite parts.
Wolfman's got nards.
I forgot about that. So there's a part where like the kids are cornered by the Wolfman, and then they're like
Kick him in the nards.
kick him in the nards, man, kick him in the nards. He's like, Wolfman ain't got no nards. And so then the kids like kick him in the balls, and then the Wolfman's like, oh, and then he's like, Wolfman's got nards. And then they throw dynamite in him and kick him out the window. And then what's awesome is like the Wolfman comes back. He like pieces himself back together because the Wolfman can't die unless it's with a silver bullet.
Oh yeah, all of his limbs come back together. And yeah.
One of the things about this movie that I think is really underrated is just the costumes and the makeup that they do for all the creatures, Frankenstein, the Wolfman, the Mummy.
Yeah, they took care with it. They spent a lot of money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's I mean, the detail is really cool. It's not hacked. It's not like a second-rate job. It's really good. I mean, they had the budget for it. I think people just maybe went into it thinking more Goonies, which I mean, I related to that, but the Goonies itself, that's a whole different, episode, is such an amazing movie that maybe Monster Squad didn't live up to that hype. But I think as its own scary movie, Monster Squad definitely lives up to my hype because that's what I related to. I don't relate it to Goonies. I think that there's correlations, but I think it's definitely its own movie on its own. So kind of like a tribute.
Yeah, it could be one of those too where people went in with it like thinking that it was going to be more serious.
Yeah.
I think that could have been what happened with the box office results where it didn't get back hardly any of its money.
Yeah, I mean,
the box office. People could have gone into it thinking, oh, this is going to be really scary. They didn't expect that Goonies kind of campy, like kids coming of age story where they're into these monsters, creatures, and then they meet them in real life and they have to battle them or whatever. So,
and I think one of the things that probably hindered the Monster Squad was that it has to do with like the Universal monsters, which were by the 80s they were on the outs. They were already on the outs. The Hammer films kind of ended in the 70s, and that was like kind of like the last that you saw of those Universal Frankenstein, Dracula.
And now you're in the late 80s where you have Freddy Krueger, Jason Voorhees,
they're
all
the
these
icons,
classic, Michael Myers.
Yeah. And so it's like the universe. Like no one, I would suspect that at that time they didn't care about the Universal.
You're right. I think you're right.
And so kind of like building off of that, they're kind of like, well, there's no buzz for that,
Right.
Like if maybe they made like knockoff characters like, oh, there's a Jason or there's a Freddy or whatever.
Oh, dude, if there's a Jason Voorhees, Michael Myers, and Freddy Krueger that come to town,
that movie
would have been huge.
Yeah, exactly. Huge. And so I think Monster Squad 2. And
it's going to be huge.
Huge. One of the things is I always wish there was a Monster Squad 2, but because I think it just bombed at the box office, they kind of pulled the plug on it and were like, we're not going to do it anymore.
Right.
But Monster Squad 2, definitely, we should pen it. That'd be a great movie.
Yeah.
But there's so much going on in Monster Squad 2, but it's a lot to talk about, and I don't want to ruin it. So definitely check out Monster Squad 2. Monster Squad. It's a movie that you should check out for Halloween. It's probably, if you don't own the movie, it's probably the only movie that you'd probably get a chance to see it on TV, maybe on AMC or one of the other channels. So if you don't get a chance to see it on TV on Halloween, rent it. Buy the Redbox or Netflix or DVD or something. It's probably not even that much, but definitely check out Monster Squad because
it's a classic. And also just to put in the plugs for the cast, it stars a slightly younger Tom Noonan as the Frankenstein monster, as well as a younger Michael Faustino, who was in Married with Children.
Bud?
Yeah, it stars Bud, bro.
Oh, he's the kid in the comic book store, right? Yes.
Yep.
And so that okay. So I'll just end with this. So there's a scene. The chubby kid in the Monster Squad club. He's kind of like he's a nerdy kind of quiet kid, and the Gillman's like coming after him, and then the Bud Bundy is in the comic book store with someone else.
He's in a shoe store?
Yeah, he's in the shoe store. He's like, open the door. No, Peg.
No pig.
Anyway,
No,
so his name's Horace, the chubby kid, and he's like, let me in, and the Gill man's slowly coming to him. So then Horace gets the shotgun, and he shoots the Gill man, and then the guy, Bud Bundy, and there's another kid with him, says the line, he's like, hey, because they call him this nickname that's offensive to him.
Yeah.
And then they're like, hey, so-and-so, good job. And he turns around with the shotgun. He's like, the name's Horace.
Yep.
It's just the camp factor. I love it. And so, anyways, this Halloween.
Check it out.
Check out Monster Squad. It's definitely worth your time, and it's a lot of fun. The next movie on our list is Fright Night. It was directed by Tom Holland, and it came out in 1985. It had a budget of about $9 million. Fright Night is a movie about a vampire that moves in next door, and there's a teenage guy that thinks that he's a vampire, and he's trying to prove that he's a vampire, all while this vampire is beginning to hit on his on his mother. This movie stars Marcy Darcy from Married with Children. Actually, that's not her real name. That's her name in the TV show. But if you know Married with Children, Marcy Darcy.
Oh, yeah.
Here's the thing. When I remember seeing this as a kid, and I never realized it was Marcy Darcy, because I don't think I watched Married with Children as a kid.
You
but
never watched Married with Children?
How dare you?
Kid. And so
Amanda Bierce is her name, by the way.
So here's the thing. When I watched it as an adult, I remember I watched it on a date, and the girl I was with, she was like, hey, that's Marcy. I'm like, oh, yeah. And I thought Marcy was the mom. Marcy's the teenage love interest, which she still looks like she's 40 in it. The other disgusting part of this movie is you see Marcy Darcy boobies. So, which is, it's so out of place, too. Because it's like, I think it takes place in like a dream or something. But anyways, that's besides the point.
I think it's when the kid is watching through his window to his neighbor's window to see who he's seducing.
Yeah.
He seduces women.
That's right. So
Chris Sarandon plays the lead, by the way, of the lead vampire.
Yeah, and so
from we were talking about Princess
Play?
Bride, Child's Play. He's been in a ton of stuff.
Yeah, which Tom Holland directed Child's Play as well, so he's probably reusing a lot of the same characters that he's had. But the movie revolves around this kid. He's suspecting his neighbor's a vampire, and he's kind of figuring it out. And the vampire, the neighbor, realizes that he's seeing that he's a vampire. So the teenage kid, he enlists the works of this aging, scary movie guy. So remember how I was talking
played by Roddy McDowall.
How I was saying that there was a Friday Night Fright Night that I used to watch. It'd be like that, or like the Joe Bob. Remember the Joe Bob?
Yep.
It'd be like if we called Joe Bob, hey Joe Bob, I need you to come over here because
that was like Monster Vision or whatever. Yeah.
There's a monster over here. So he calls the local guy, who's pretty much like no one's taking him seriously anymore. They're kind of like over his TV review and everything. And so he's going over there just to kind of check it out. And the movie kind of ensues, and they kind of start figuring out that this guy's a vampire. The other thing is the vampire starts courting the son's mother. So now it's kind of...
Because Chris Sarandon suspects that the son knows that he's really a vampire.
Yeah.
So he's trying to get back at him, or to try to cover it up by getting to his mom.
Exactly. And so that's pretty much the basis of the movie. It's fun. There's a lot of fun, campy things that happen throughout the movie. It's more simplistic because, like the other movies that we're talking about, there's like different storylines going on, like different things happening to different people that you kind of see different aspects of the town. This is more not secluded, but it's more centralized. So it just has the main story, which is he's trying to figure out about the vampire next door neighbor, and it all revolves around him and the mom.
Yeah, and if you guys look at the cover of it, when you look up Fright Night, it's got one of the most iconic 80s covers, I think, of any VHS, DVD, whatever you can find.
Yeah.
It's got this cover where it's the house, this dark house, it's nighttime, full moon, and it's got this vampire kind of like thing that's the clouds that are kind of coming out of the clouds. Where, for me, it's one of the most, perfect 80s representation of a horror movie cover for a movie, to where it's perfect.
Oh yeah.
The soundtrack is great. The acting's great. It's definitely over the top as far as the acting, like Roddy McDowall and Chris Sarandon and stuff like that. But it's one of those movies where we use the word fun too much, but it's a really fun horror movie. Where I haven't seen it, I'll be honest, I haven't seen it for probably 4 or 5 years. It's been a long time since I've seen it from start to finish. But this is one that I remember I watched and I said, you know what, I gotta watch it again soon.
Yeah.
And I was just thinking about it the other day. I'm like, I have to watch Fright Night again. It's such a fun movie.
And I think when we say fun, I think we mean more like entertaining. So if like Killer Klowns from Outer Space, that one's fun. Monster Squad, that one's fun. A lot of these movies to us are fun because we enjoy watching it, but the movie might not necessarily be like, have the comedic sidekick or,
it's not Ghostbusters.
Yeah,
fun.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But it's fun because it's entertaining and it keeps you entertained throughout the whole movie. So that's what we love about it, and that's why we have fun watching. And
it doesn't take itself too seriously.
Yeah. And so it's kind of like, it's a vampire movie, and you're going to expect vampire stuff to happen, just like with Lost Boys. That movie, it was probably taking itself a little more seriously, where this one, they're kind of like, if you take Lost Boys and Fright Night, that'd be a great double feature right there.
Right.
And so if you want to have like a vampire double feature. So Fright Night, definitely check out this Halloween. It's one that, like we said, it's fun, it's entertaining. It's more centralized, so you're not going to have any side stories. But it's definitely one to check out this Halloween. So that's the conclusion of part 2 of our 80s movies to watch during Halloween. Or is it? We've come to the realization that there are so many great movies in the 80s.
So many.
That we just can't have 2 parts. We need 3. So stay tuned next week for our part 3 episode of the 80s to watch during Halloween. Now, this part 3 is going to be a little different because in part 1 and part 2 episodes, we kind of focused on about anywhere between like 8 to 10 movies that we reviewed. So part 3 is going to be a little different because there's so many movies we need to review, and we don't want to leave any of them out.
Yeah, it gets long.
Yeah, so what we're going to do for part 3 is the part 3 episode for the 80s is going to be called Honorable Mentions. And so it's going to be about 20 to 25 movies that we forgot to mention. And so we're just going to give you quick hits on each one of these movies, just to give you an idea of what they're about. But they're going to be shorter episodes, which you guys might even love, but they're going to be shorter hits and shorter things just to give you their honorable mentions. But there's so many honorable mentions that we have to make its own episode.
And again, to be clear, this is the decade we grew up in.
Yes.
So the 80s movies for us hold a special place because this is the era in which we grew up. So, they hold a special place in our heart. But honestly, they should hold a special place in anyone's heart because they're so iconic.
Yeah.
Like all the different series and, the iconic horror villains and stuff like that. There's so many great things that came out of the 80s for horror movies.
And I think that the thing about the 80s is we all love the nostalgia of the 80s because it gave us the idea of, a simpler time. We had technology, we had, like we said, VCRs, Nintendos, stuff like that, TV. Beta. But it was simple. Like our lives weren't revolved around technology,
right.
But it was. We loved watching movies, but we could go out and play and do whatever. And I think a lot of us missed that. So talking about the 80s and the movies we not used to love, but still love, but remembering the time when we saw them makes it that much better. So I think we're actually going to be focusing a little more on the 80s this year. So what we're going to do is we're going to release part 3 of the 80s honorable mentions next week, and what we're going to do is the 2000s and presents, we're going to save those for later,
and 90s
we're going to save those for later, possibly later on next year, definitely for next Halloween, but we are going to scale those back and focus more on the 80s, because like I said,
including 2 special bonus episodes.
That's right. So after the honorable mentions, there's going to be a part 4,
and a part 5,
and a part 5. So it's actually going to be a part 4 episode. It's going to have 2 marathon episodes.
There we go.
One being Nightmare on Elm Street.
The entire series.
The entire series, because the new Nightmare came out in the 90s, and it wasn't called Nightmare on Elm Street. It was just called A New Nightmare. And then the Friday the 13th series, 1 through 8, not including Jason Goes to Hell or Jason X, because those were called Jason, not Friday the 13th.
Mm-hmm.
And they came out in the 90s and 2002. So we have a lot more episodes to come that are going to focus mainly on the 80s. I know we talked about the decades, but we just came to this conclusion. We don't want to leave any movies in the 80s out, because I think if you guys understand where we're coming from and and focus on the love of the 80s horror movies, I think you guys will too, and it would give you more of appreciation for the 90s and the other movies that are to come.
And it'll give you more movies to go look up and watch.
Absolutely. And a lot of the movies that come out during Halloween are movies that from the 80s. And
right.
So, I mean, yeah, there's some from the 90s and the present ones, but definitely the 80s is the staple. You got to start with that. So
there's so many classics.
It's the bread and butter. So definitely stay tuned next week for part 3, which is the honorable mentions episode, and then after that it's going to be part 4, which is going to be the Nightmare on Elm Street series and the Friday the 13th series.
Heck yeah, dog.
All right, well, thank you for being with us and tuning in for 4-Way Stop and listening to our crazy banter and talk about horror movies. We hope you love them like we do, and if not, we love you guys. Thank you for listening. All right, check you next episode.